For years, many Rush fans believed that the musical story between Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and the late Neil Peart had reached its final chapter. After all, Rush's last tour ended in 2015, and Peart's passing in 2020 seemed to close the door forever. Then something unexpected happened. When Lee and Lifeson began discussing a return to the stage, they knew one thing: nobody could replace Neil Peart. Instead of finding a copy of him, they searched for a musician with her own voice. That search eventually led them to German drummer Anika Nilles. Lee later explained that the goal was never to find another Neil, because such a person simply doesn't exist. Pyrrhus. Music Radar. What nobody expected was the chemistry that would emerge when the three musicians finally entered a rehearsal room together. At first, Nilles wasn't even a longtime Rush superfan, and everyone felt the pressure of the situation. But during those early sessions, something began to click in a way none of them had anticipated. And the moment that chemistry first revealed itself would leave Geddy and Alex seriously reconsidering what Rush's future could look like. What made Anika Nilles stand out wasn't her ability to imitate Neil Peart. In fact, it was the opposite. Known for her advanced groove concepts, odd time feel, and creative phrasing, Nilles built her reputation through original drumming videos and performances long before joining Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. Rather than approaching Rush's music as a museum piece, she brought a fresh perspective to songs the band members had played for decades. During rehearsals, Lee and Lifeson quickly noticed that Nilles listened differently. Instead of focusing only on reproducing drum parts note for note, she paid close attention to how every section connected musically. Her approach created new conversations inside familiar songs, allowing the music to breathe while still respecting the original arrangements. That balance was exactly what the project needed. But the deeper surprise came when Lifeson realized that Nilles wasn't simply adapting to their playing style. Somehow, all three musicians were beginning to adapt to each other, and that would change the entire dynamic of the band on stage. As rehearsals continued, something remarkable started to happen. The focus shifted away from replacing what had been lost and toward discovering what was possible. Alex Lifeson later described how naturally the musical connection developed. Instead of feeling like a guest drummer sitting in with two Rush legends, Anika Nilles became an active part of the creative process. The three musicians spent hours working through classic songs, but they were also reacting to one another in real time, finding new accents, dynamics, and energy within the music. For Lee and Lifeson, that experience was both exciting and unexpected. After decades of performing with the same lineup, they suddenly found themselves hearing familiar material through fresh ears. Nilles' modern drumming vocabulary introduced subtle changes in feel that inspired new responses from bass and guitar. The result wasn't a recreation of the past. It was a living musical conversation. And nowhere was that chemistry more obvious than during one particular Rush classic that would become a defining moment of the project. One of the clearest examples of this chemistry emerged as the trio worked through some of Rush's most demanding material. Songs that had been played countless times suddenly felt different, not because the notes had changed, but because the interaction had changed. Anika Nilles brought a fluid, groove-oriented approach that encouraged spontaneous musical reactions. Geddy Lee found himself responding to rhythmic ideas in ways he hadn't expected, while Alex Lifeson discovered new spaces within arrangements he had known for decades. Instead of simply following a fixed blueprint, the musicians were actively listening and adapting to one another. That level of communication is difficult to manufacture. It develops only when players trust each other completely. By this stage of rehearsals, that trust was growing rapidly. The pressure and uncertainty that had surrounded the project were beginning to disappear. But the biggest test still lay ahead. Rehearsing in private was one thing. Standing in front of an audience and making that chemistry work under the spotlight would be something else entirely. And the outcome was far from guaranteed. As performance dates drew closer, the question lingering over the project was simple. Would the chemistry survive outside the rehearsal room? For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, the answer came through repeated run-throughs that felt less like practice and more like real performances. The music flowed naturally. Transitions became effortless. Most importantly, the sense of communication between the three musicians kept getting stronger. Anika Nilles wasn't trying to step into Neil Peart's shoes. She respected the original parts while bringing her own musical identity to the stage. That authenticity earned the trust of Lee and Lifeson. Instead of feeling constrained by comparison, the trio focused on creating something honest in the present. What emerged was a partnership built on mutual respect. Lee and Lifeson contributed decades of shared history, while Nilles added a fresh perspective and energy that pushed the music forward. Together, they discovered that honoring Rush's legacy didn't require standing still. And that realization led to the most important lesson of all, a lesson that explains why their musical chemistry became so powerful in the first place. In the end, the hidden musical chemistry between Anika Nilles, Geddy Lee, and Alex Lifeson wasn't based on imitation. It was built on something far more meaningful: trust, respect, and a willingness to evolve. From the beginning, Lee and Lifeson understood that Neil Peart's role in Rush was unique and irreplaceable. Rather than searching for someone to recreate the past, they found a drummer who could help them move forward while honoring everything that had come before. Anika Nilles brought her own voice, her own ideas, and her own energy, and that made all the difference. What started as a cautious experiment gradually became a genuine musical partnership. Through rehearsals, performances, and countless hours of collaboration, the three musicians discovered a connection that allowed classic Rush songs to feel alive again. Not because they were trying to relive history, but because they were creating new musical moments together. For fans, that's perhaps the most inspiring part of the story. The chemistry wasn't hidden because it was mysterious. It was hidden because it could only be revealed through time, trust, and shared experience. And in many ways, that's exactly what Rush has always been about: extraordinary musicians listening to one another, pushing each other forward, and finding something greater than any one player could create alone. Even after all these years, that spirit remains very much alive.